Are live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back to a live chat for March 20th, 2024. We've had a heck of a week already. As you know, or you might have heard, the CDM, the Certified Digital Meteorologist Signia, was given to me after going through a whole process, and it's something that honestly I never thought I'd get. Here it is. Let me show you it. There it is. Boom. Of course, I am on the CDM board. We started this process. The reason why we started this process is because we recognized at the AMS that there need to be a designation between individuals who provide outstanding content on meteorology and those who, well, let's just say, tend to produce some ridiculous stuff, like posting the CFS model as something that you would use for storm forecasting, or using the 360-hour GFS for a storm, or using a 10-day snow map, stuff like that. So this was a response to that, saying not that those people can't post that, they can post whatever they want, but that there's going to be a separation between those who produce content, and there's a lot of meteorologists out there that do this, that present content that is trustworthy, and others who do not. So I know that several meteorologists who work in media, like TV, but are responsible only for their social media. So, for example, like on X, or making reports on Facebook, they were able to get this as well. And then my situation is different because, as you know, started off as a blog. No other companies support what I do. It's just me and my webcam and all of you, which is amazing considering this started 17 years ago as a very simple WordPress blog. It was basically a very generic WordPress layout with the daily forecast, and then I added on the more technical content, and then 2 years later tried to see whether people would actually pay for it, and they have, and here we are. So that's some amazing stuff. But if you have any questions about the CDM, I'll definitely answer them. I know that there's people here already on YouTube, and there are people here on of course, in the premium chat room and on X. If you have any questions about that, I'll be happy to answer. I will be making content about the CDM, about like how to earn it, what to look for, how to study for the test, which is, let me tell you something, very difficult. Not just taking the test, but preparing for the test. I'll explain all that in upcoming videos over the next couple of months. We'll set up a nice series, so that way anybody who's interested in earning the Signia and earning the seal can do so, and at least have some idea of how to do it. So that's that. Now let's talk about what's going on with the weather. And there is a lot of interesting stuff going on, guys. The pattern is starting to change. And I kind of like these time periods because there's so much unknown. You're going to learn a lot about all the theories we have about El Niños and La Niñas and how they change, and all the interaction during this time period. So it's really exciting, right? Because you're basically getting an on-the-fly education. So no matter what stage you are in studying meteorology, you are always a student. Always. People are called a professor, people are called an expert, but in reality, we're all students trying to learn how the atmosphere works and how changes in the atmosphere influence other aspects in the atmosphere. So right now we have the SOI, and we see that it has progressed into the trend of going to a weak positive state. Now, when you have a SOI around 2, 3, 4, it's pretty weak. Okay, so you could literally call it neutral. Let's say positive neutral. Once the SOI starts going well above 5 and towards 10, that's when we start to really see the influences of La Nina. So while that is taking shape, we can see the trends and we can see the daily values here, more and more periods of positive rather than negative values. All that's evolving while we're starting to see a fundamental change in the subsurface. So this is something that we've been studying for quite some time. I've been talking about this in the long range thoughts. We've talked about this in the pattern overall. When we start to see this cold water start to expand, we get the idea of we're going to see a rapid change. Initially, it's going to be in the eastern zones. That's typically how it works out. Nino 1, Nino 2. You don't want to make the assumption that that's going to be the established orientation of La Nina, but you can certainly see where the trends are going and the rapid state in which this La Nina is changing. And I would not be surprised if we see the La Nina state really starting to take hold by early May at the rate that this is starting to change. You're starting to see, again, the subsurface taking shape here. You're seeing the overall equatorial upper ocean heat anomalies going into a negative state. When you see this signal on this chart, again, this is from the cpc.nsep.noaa.gov. It's totally free. You could go check it out yourself. When you start seeing this signal in the chart, that means we're definitely heading for a change. And another factor here, this is the change in the weekly sea surface temperature anomalies and you can see here the rapid cooling taking shape. A little bit stronger Nino 1+2, Nino 3, Nino 3.4, and 4 is slower cooling, but starting to happen gradually. So while that's all taking shape, and while we're seeing these changes, the MJO is going to be a very important factor. While we're watching the MJO, understand that you cannot take the same rules that we do in January and February for March and April. And you can't also take them you can't use the same rules for July and June and July, should I say. Why am I saying that? The time of year that you're in influences the state of the MJO's impact on the 500 millibar pattern for a variety of reasons. You're seeing a change in the thermal gradient on mass in northern hemisphere. This changes the way that we see convection developing out in the Pacific and the Indian Ocean and even the Atlantic. So you can't take the same rules. So when some individuals were seeing, hey, the MJO is moving to phase 8, that means definitely we're going to have cold and storms. No. What you're going to have with the MJO in phase 7 and 8 during this time of year with a changing ENSO state is an active subtropical jet stream and a polar jet stream that is starting to lift northward, that's starting to retreat. Add that factor to what's going on with the polar vortex. Now, as you can see, the polar vortex has been smashed into plenty of different pieces. We talked about this last week. What we're going to be seeing going forward over the next 10 to 15 days is the influence of the polar vortex starting to go away, which is normal for this time of year. Should be happening. And we can tell that should be happening based on the chart that we have here, zonal winds at 10 millibars. You see this line right here? This is average. You see how it's kind of declining here? What this basically means is that the average, the normal evolution of the polar vortex is basically towards weakening and dissipating, having less and less of an influence on the 500 millibar pattern. What we're seeing here in the forecast here is that right now it's as disrupted as you can get. In fact, it is the 6th most disrupted polar vortex setup with a complete wind reversal that we have in this history in modern history. We're seeing, though, that there's going to be a rapid rebound. Now, what does this mean? Well, it means that basically the polar vortex is going back to a weak, normal state. And even when it goes into its strong state, it's still relatively weak. So this means that the influence of the polar vortex is really starting to come to an end. And what that does to the pattern overall is that it takes this big trough and starts to weaken it. Not only over North America, but over the Northern Hemisphere overall. Because what we're seeing here is that with a higher sun angle, we're seeing faster and faster moderation of polar air masses. You're seeing a rapid reduction of the thermal gradient that drives these strong polar troughs. See, again, remember, this whole setup here is driven by thermal gradient changes, mass changes. The mass changes and the thermal gradient changes are causing the atmosphere to be imbalanced, and the atmosphere is trying to get back into balance. So that's what causes this whole setup here. Now that setup is going away, which is typical for this time of year. So as we move forward, as the polar vortex starts to weaken, as the MJO goes from a phase 7-8 and then straight into a neutral state, and the tropical forcing starts to change more to a La Nina-like signal, we start to see more and more support for a very progressive, fast-moving storm track with these upper-level lows sprinkled about. Now, as we go through April with this type of signal here, we can also see it on the GFS, and we see it in the ensemble guidance. What you have here are these fast-moving short waves and slow-moving upper-level lows. So you'll get stuck in a pattern for a couple of days where it's relatively quiet, and then as these upper-level lows get closer, it gets more and more unsettled. Not major storms, but just unsettled conditions. So you'll get a pesky trough hanging around, scattered showers, variable clouds. Once you get out of that pattern, then you have several days of just very quiet, sunny conditions, not much going on. Then that upper level low starts marching across the country again. And that's going to be the theme throughout much of April. While that is evolving, the cold air masses are going to be retreating. So what's going to be the dominant air mass? Look at where we are at by 10 days out. All your polar and Arctic air masses are getting locked up in Canada. They're getting pushed, they're getting kicked in there, and you get thrown into jail. So your dominant influences will be the Pacific air mass, the tropical air mass, maritime air mass for the northern mid-Atlantic. Okay? You'll get some influences from polar air masses, but it'll be very weak. And this generally means that as we move forward, we're going to see more systems featuring more convective precipitation, i.e. showers and thunderstorms, and we're going to see less and less of these massive rainstorms. And that isn't going to be the case for the end of spring and summer. We have to watch to see the evolution of La Nina to see how the Bermuda High works out. We'll wait on that discussion. We don't have enough data yet to really make a determination on that. But at least as we move into the start of the baseball season, pesky showers and slow-moving upper-level lows are going to be a pain in the neck to forecast for, especially in the 5 to 10-day periods. It's going to be a lot of volatility in that time period, which we've already seen. Once we get under 5 days, you have a much better idea of where the upper-level lows are, and you get a better idea of what to expect with precipitation, and the forecast becomes very, very easy. So the volatility 5 days out, pretty trustworthy. Volatilities after 5 days, very, very poor. So that's how I see this evolution taking shape. In the meantime, right now we have a cold front moving through. pretty stiff northwesterly winds. It's a bit breezy out there. We're seeing a lot of mixing going on, mixing some of that wind down from 850 millibars, creating our wind gusts. And of course, we have our pressure gradient supporting some of these stronger winds. So we're seeing wind gusts around 25 knots, 30 knots, 25 knots. So anywhere between 25 to 35 miles per hour. So if you have a garbage can outside, it might be flying down the street. So just be prepared for that. And it's all being driven by this cold front. Now, let me refresh this real fast. And of course, this is from WeatherTap. If anyone's interested in where I'm getting the data from, this is from WeatherTap, which I've used since about 1998, since I was a freshman in college. I feel like I'm dating myself. There we go. So with the cold front moving through, we do have some convective precipitation, but now that we're seeing the instability starting to back off, those more convective showers are starting to weaken as they move through. They're still pretty robust here around southeastern New England. That's all exiting out into the Atlantic. If you're in the Poconos or Catskills, you still have threat for a few flurries and a few snow showers, so just be prepared for that. The highest elevations, just be prepared for slick roadways out there. It's going to be a little bit slick out there. Now, with everything going on, here's our polar air mass coming in. This time period, this from now until, let's say, Friday, is going to be the last hurrah of the major polar air mass influence. And the reason why is because the support of this deep trough is going to be collapsing. It's going away. And the dominant jet stream influence is going to start to be the subtropical jet stream. And that's where we're going to have to watch our storms coming out of the plains and heading towards the mid-Atlantic via upper level lows and troughs and whatnot. The polar jet stream is going to become less and less of a factor. And again, we can see that here very nicely here. There's a polar jet stream lifting northward, giving way. There it is up here. And the dominant influence is what's going on with the subtropical jet stream. So you're getting this very progressive polar jet stream with everything lifting northward, locking up all your polar and Arctic air, and your subtropical jet stream sending shortwave after shortwave through. What does that look like? Well, let's take a look here. Okay, so there's our upper level winds. There's our shortwave exiting. Again, notice the strong lifting here now towards New England. And the water vapor satellite picture, what we're going to be watching here is this feature here. This is going to be the theme as we move forward over the next 8 weeks. Next 8 weeks, watch the desert Southwest. Where these storms start to organize in the desert Southwest, if they're able to pull up deep moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, then you're going to be dealing with a more dynamic storm. If they don't really pull up much moisture and the convection's more scattered, maybe focus more on dry lines around Texas, then you're not going to really be dealing with a very impressive shortwave, so not as much of an influence. So our storm threats are all going to be coming from here, heading up towards the mid-Atlantic. That's our theme. Not much going on coming in from Canada. If you get a polar air mass to interact through April, it's going to be very marginal. It'll moderate quickly. It'll impact you for about 24 hours and it's out. So how that looks like with these short waves, well, here's a perfect example for Saturday. Now we have a pretty good rainfall event setting up for Saturday with some strong lifting. I'm a little bit skeptical on these higher rainfall amounts, but I had to at least put them in the forecast to at least give people a heads up. But I wouldn't be surprised if the higher rainfall amounts are more isolated than what's being shown in some of the guidance. And the reason why I say that is that this whole structure is getting kicked to the east pretty quickly. I don't doubt the intensity. I don't doubt the moisture transport. I doubt the length of time that we see this rainfall. And the reason why is because the models have been moving in this direction of kicking this further east. And remember, I said a couple of days ago, hey, don't be surprised based on this whole pattern setup. Remember, a couple of days ago, they had this as a major nor'easter and people were getting excited with snow maps. And I was saying, this is not likely going to be that type of storm because the whole pattern is becoming progressive. the whole pattern is shifting east because of this trough right here in the west coast. You see that? You see this trough right here? That whole trough is going to kick everything east. So my concern or my thinking is that yes, we'll get heavy rain on Saturday. Yes, you'll have a wave of low pressure intensified because of all this strong lifting in PVA and the interaction between the polar and subtropical jet streams. But I think that the duration of rain might actually get cut off a little bit more than what we're seeing right now. So I'm thinking this is more of an isolated 2.5 inch threat and more likely 1.5 inches, being more widespread. And you can see this pretty nicely here with the moisture. Now, take a look at this. Okay, there's 700 millibar relative humidity. Look at the cutoff here. That's pretty sharp. So this tells me heavy rainfall band, sure, moving through, and then a rapid cutoff. I mean, we go from 90%, 100% relative humidity to when you're at the dark gray, that's 0%. That's near 0%. So that's pretty dry. That is very, very strong dry air transport. And notice the whole system's moving very quickly. So if you look at the precipitable water values, the deepest precipitable water values are focused right on the coast, but they don't linger. They come in and go out very fast. Okay, so this is a fast moving rainfall event, I think, that has a chance to be pretty intense. And then once this blows through, then we just watch the subtropical jet stream to see how far north these moisture transports get. If they get cut off over the southeast, we're not going to see a lot of rain from these systems. Notice the one that comes in on next Saturday, notice how weak that transport is. So that's going to start to be the dynamic telltale sign on what we're dealing with each one of these shortwaves as they march on through. So I wanted to make sure to show you this when I was talking about with what does the storm look like coming out of the desert southwest. The one that we're going to be dealing with on Saturday, plenty of deep moisture, very fast moving. The next one that comes through right around opening day, unfortunately, this one, again, relatively fast moving, a little bit more moisture, good chance for scattered showers out of this one. Then the one that follows after that, again, coming out of the desert southwest, doesn't have as much of a moisture transport signal, likely to be much weaker. So that is going to be the signal that we're going to be studying. Meanwhile, all your Arctic air, you know where the Arctic air is because your precipitable water values are incredibly low. So this is a sign of Arctic air all locked up here in northern Canada where it can stay because we all want to go outside and watch baseball games. At least I do. So that is perfectly fine for me. So what we're looking at here for Saturday, again, this is moving much faster than the previous guidance. Comes through, shoots out. If you're looking for snow, as I said, go to the Green and White Mountains. You'll have plenty of it. You can go skiing, have fun, enjoy it, but it's not going to be anywhere near here, not even in the Poconos, unless maybe a spare inch in the highest elevations as the storm exits. But look how fast this is moving now. Don't be surprised as we get closer to this that the rainfall amounts on the model guidance starts to back off a little bit, not because of the intensity, but because the rain shield is moving so quickly. And the reason why the rain shield is moving so quickly is because the pattern overall is moving so quickly. So that clears out. Then really Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, not too bad. The easterly wind component that we were worried about with coastal flooding is no longer a more significant threat, but there might be some minor coastal flooding Tuesday night into Wednesday because of this easterly wind component. So just be prepared for that. Then here comes our next cold front. And again, what we're going to have to watch for in this system is just how much interaction and moisture transport we get this far north, because essentially you have this warm front with tropical air mass trying to race towards the coast. And the question will be for all you guys who are going to the Mets game or the Phillies game next Thursday is just how much moisture transport we have here. I'd left with scattered showers. I'm not totally buying this scenario just yet, But I certainly like the idea. Oh, by the way, you Yankee fans, I know you guys are going to be in Houston. Not to worry, you're fine. But Mets and Phillies fans, you might be dealing with a rain delay for opening day. We'll see. We'll see how it plays out with this warm front and the timing. The good thing is that it looks like a lot of the timing is more towards the evening. So if they start the games in the afternoon, you'll probably get through most of them without much of an issue. So again, we'll keep an eye on that. That storm exits out. And then the one that follows, not all that impressive. So there we have it. That is my spiel for today. Now I'm going to answer all your questions. And we'll see how many. We actually have quite a few. So that is awesome. And I will answer as many as I can. And also, let's see. It looks like YouTube's definitely active. And let's see here. Let's see what we have here. Thank you on the congratulations. I really appreciate it. 360-hour GFS should be used for humor purposes only. I would hope so. That's all I could say. I would hope so, but sometimes I got people running around posting the CFS out to 600 hours. I like posting snowstorms for like April. We got to do better. Apparently, Paris is going to ban air. We were just talking about this. Me and Susan were just talking about this. Yes, Paris is going to ban air conditioning in the Olympic athlete rooms for the Summer Olympics in Paris this summer. For climate change? All right, well, let's think about this here just for a minute, ladies and gentlemen. They have to fly, all of them, to Paris. You already blew the whole save the earth climate change stuff right out the gate because everyone's going to fly there. All of the media, the cameras, the lights, are they not going to have anything on at night? It doesn't make any sense. But we're going to turn off the air conditioning. Everything else is going to be fine. We'll turn off the air conditioning. But as far as flying, getting everyone there, the food, oh my God. I don't know. I don't know what to say to that. That's just, sometimes there's just nothing you could say. I don't know. Does the manner in which ENSO is cooling indicate a greater chance for east-based La Nina, resulting in the ridge being displaced to the east and thus allowing cold fronts to reach our area this summer? Not yet. Not the rate. The rate is something that might be something of an influence on climate change in terms of the nature of the rest of the Pacific. But it's hard to say. There's a lot of research going into it. We don't have a lot of data in terms of the rapid rate in which we're seeing the change. Not so much in the sea surface temperatures, but I'm talking about the SOI and the forcing. That really doesn't impact orientation yet. What we're going to have to watch out for with the orientation is where does that gradient set up, both at the pressure and the thermal gradient at the surface, to drive the convection. We're still a little bit too far out for that, but I think we'll get a pretty good answer on that in May. Let's see, the MJO and polar vortex smashing were about 2 months late. Yeah, pretty much. Oh my God. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Your winter forecast for the upper mid-Atlantic was really good. Thank you. But why do you think that some thought the MJO would move into 8, 1, and 2? And, excuse me, what was the main reasons that it stayed mostly in the warm phases? Okay, so first of all, I mean, even I fell for this, to be honest with you, with the MJO phases. And here's the thing that I found very interesting with the winter, which really needs to be reviewed. In terms of the long-range climate models, they were really driving the idea of major high-latitude blocking. So you had your CFS, your EPS long range, even the Canadian version, all suggesting the same thing. So if they're showing this type of pattern, it would suggest that the MJO would be moving into phase 8, 1, and 2. It did for like 5 seconds, and then it would go right back out or go into a neutral state. I think we need to see whether the influences in the Tonga eruption with the water vapor and the state of the Pacific anomaly, temperature anomalies, are displacing the normal influences that we would expect with high latitude blocking. Because a lot of the key factors we were looking at did work out. Okay, so you had plenty of convection around the date line. You had, with the QBO, plenty of disruptions of the polar vortex. Could it just be that, hey, look, this time the polar vortex was disrupted, but most of it was focused towards Asia? That could have been the bottom line there. That because of that disruption more towards Asia, it changes the mountain torque, which influences the MJO. The MJO heads towards phase 8, then runs into a wall and crashes. That could be the determining factor. Don't know yet. Still studying it. I am keeping an eye on research that's out there on the AMS. I get online the climate studies on there from the AMS. The studies more than just climate, but also seasonal patterns and whatnot. I know that research is being started on that, so I'll keep you posted. Another M-class solar flare without any apparent CME with it seems to be pretty common with flares this cycle. Yeah, and there's a lot of talk about how this cycle is producing some very unusual observations with the sunspots. It's going to be curious to see when we go into cycle 25 and what that looks like, which I think we're close. I'd say maybe we might start to see a flip and a peak in the activity, solar sunspot activity, by July or August. So we'll see if that works out. But that's my suspicion. The 500 millibar pattern in the west is rather flat. Trough to get a storm at 6 close to the coast for any length of time with this setup. Yeah, it is. That's kind of my point with this rainfall that I'm a little suspicious about. That maybe it gets very heavy rainfall, but it gets kicked out quickly. How do you anticipate this spring's fire season being? Oh, that's a good question. If we get locked out of these upper level lows, we're going to get pretty dry. And if we get pretty dry with any type of southwesterly wind, we're going to have some issues. I think we're going to have more of a serious problem this summer with the Bermuda highs, because you'll get dry conditions in some spots. You get your setup for the convection, and then the thunderstorms will cause lightning, of course. Hit one of those dry fields, there's your fire. So I'm concerned about that more in the summer than in the spring. But we'll see how it works out. Right now, I'm not too terribly concerned. Let's take a look and see what we got here on YouTube. How come winter came back? Not really winter. I did say it was going to be below normal for March. I don't consider this winter. I'm sorry. I mean, I know that we had a flurry move through. We have a polar air mass that's in here for about 24 hours, but really not all that impressive. I've seen much worse. Trust me. It's 50 today. I couldn't call this winter. Exactly. Yes, it snowed. It did snow in the higher elevations. Look, I got news for you. It snowed when I graduated college in Oswego, which is in northwestern New York, by the Great Lakes. Higher elevations, while the rest of the region is in the 50s and 60s, can still see snow. So, just so you, I mean, I'm sure you already know that. Let's see. Believe it'll be a nor'easter. What I'm getting from this is slightly above average temperatures and low to zero severe weather in April. I would say if you see the upper level lows tracking towards the Tennessee River Valley or the southern Ohio River Valley, then most likely there would just be rain events. If you see the upper level lows tracking towards the Ohio River Valley and towards the eastern Great Lakes, then we'll have to watch out for severe events. Each setup is going to be unique, so I wouldn't let your guard down on severe weather. I think that the bulk of the severe weather in spring is going to be focused towards the Southern Plains, Central Plains, Mississippi River Valley, and Ohio River Valley. That is typically how it sets up in La Nina anyway, and I think we're going to see that influence more and more. Will this nor'easter that's expected, not really a nor'easter, guys. It's not really the components for a nor'easter, but technically, if you're looking for snow again, head for the Green and White Mountains. That's where skiing. Those of you who like to ski, it's going to be perfect for you. Okay, it's going to be a nice little snowfall for the higher elevations, dry enough too for it to snow on. So I think you'll be happy with that. Does an east base and central base La Nina impact eastern U.S. winter weather? Oh, absolutely. But we got like 6 months to get to that. So, but yes, it definitely does. Will we have a heat wave or get a heat wave? I think there's a pretty good chance. Usually La Ninas do. I don't have really much more information than that. Let's see. I think that's it. Honey, is there anything on X?
Yep.
Oh boy, we got some things on X. What do we got? And all right. What's that? Okay, so rainfall amounts overall on the coastal plain, I'm looking at. I think most locations will be around 1.5 inches, and then you'll get some locations pushing over 2 inches in brief heavier downpours. The focus is going to be towards the coast. So if you're in Cape May, Atlantic, Ocean, Monmouth, up towards Staten Island, Long Island, all of Long Island, southern Connecticut, that's where you're going to have your best potential of seeing some spots pushing over 2 inches. I think this is going to be fast moving, and right now the data suggests that the bulk of the heaviest rainfall is going to be in the late morning to early afternoon hours. So unfortunately, right in the heart of Saturday, so like let's say 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., it's going to be pretty wet out there. So if you have any outdoor plans, you might want to delay until Sunday, because then it'll be chillier, but it'll be dry, plenty of sunshine. But Saturday looks like more like a washout. Okay, so this is a great question. This I definitely want to answer. If a strong El Nino means very mild air, then will a strong La Nina mean lots of cold air? Okay. Here's the thing with ENSO. A lot of individuals like to say El Nino equals X and La Nina equals Y. The reality is that El Nino and La Nina are only one piece of the puzzle. Any strong El Nino or La Nina, strong, either one, is going to lead to generally non-snowless winters. Okay, most winters with either a strong El Nino or strong La Nina are relatively quiet in terms of snowfall. The reason why is because the tropical influence is so strong that it overwhelms any type of interaction with the polar jet stream. So in El Nino, the subtropical jet stream is ripping, and it doesn't have time to interact with the polar jet stream, so you get a lot of missed storms, or the cold air comes in after the storm, so on and so forth. In La Ninas, the storm track is shifted towards the Great Lakes. The southeast ridge is very strong, and you barely have any snowfall at all. When you have weak to moderate El Ninos or La Ninas, that's when you typically have the majority of your colder, snowier seasons. Why? Because the polar and subtropical jet streams are able to play nice with each other, just in different ways. So with El Nino, you're more likely to have a deep trough in both the subtropical and polar jet streams. So you could have more storms coming out of the Gulf of Mexico, riding up the coast with cold air in place, and your widespread snowfall event. Or storms redeveloping off the coast, like what we had this winter, with snow changing over to rain and whatnot. That, though, is all dependent on so many other factors, from the state of the cryosphere, when we study the Siberian snowfall and see how much that grows and how strong the polar and Arctic air masses are, the state of the high latitude blocking and the polar vortex, whether or not we have a negative NAO, what position it's in, how long does it stay in, what are the other factors going on in the Pacific, what's the MJO doing. So you can see there's a lot of stuff going on here. But if you're looking for an active season, you want to look for a weak to moderate El Nino or La Nina. You want to have your SOI state basically between 10 and 15. Okay? Because that is your measure for forcing mechanisms in the atmosphere. So either plus 10 to 15 or minus 10 to 15. And then, of course, you want to see how all those factors interact and come together. So that's the start of it. Okay, then there's a lot of stuff you have to add in there. All right, so okay, well, let's go pull up the data here. Let me see something here. I just got a question. I just want to pull up some data just to confirm something here. We will. Okay, so 2000. So let's see. 2010-11 was a strong La Nina. Based on the data that we have here, 2010-11 during the winter months was a moderate La Nina. A strong La Nina. Let's see. A good example of strong La Nina would be, let's say, 98, 99. That's a pretty good strong La Nina. In 99, 2000. So again, it's not just the ENSO state too. It's also all the other factors that come in together with it. So for example, if you have very strong high latitude blocking, let's say the polar vortex is really disrupted, that could overcome the La Nina or El Nino influences. So it's not just one thing. My suggestion, do not focus on just one thing, because the atmosphere is far more complicated than that. No, Boris, I'm sorry, it's moderate. But that's okay. Once had snow in the air in the higher elevations of the Poconos on Mother's Day years back. Yep. Yeah, it can get... Sometimes the snow just doesn't want to leave. So, overall, the themes that we're talking about for tonight. If you're looking for a lot of severe weather, you probably want to head towards the plains, Mississippi River Valley, Ohio River Valley. We've already seen that. Even the upper Midwest. Snow, the Rockies, they've had enough, and in northern New England, Green and White Mountains. For our region, I think that we've seen the worst of our heavy rainfall events. I think. the way that we're seeing the moisture transport getting cut off here in the data, especially as we move further out, which is good because we don't want we've had enough rain to saturate the water table. We don't want enough to create flash flooding, obviously. So that's certainly something that it's always tough to balance because you don't want the flooding, but if we don't have enough rain, then we start to deal with fire danger and whatnot, which is something we do not want to deal with. Let's see what other questions that we have here. Certainly some great stuff, you guys. Goodbye, Boris. Boris has left the building. There we go. All right, so with that, we'll take on a couple more questions, and then we will call the night because it's already 8:45. Do you know what's crazy right now? I just saw this coming through. Did you guys hear about this thing going on with the Dodgers? What the guy? Let's see here. Who was the translator? Yeah, Shohei Orianto. What is his? Ohtani's. Okay. His interpreter was stealing $4.5 million and gambling on it. Holy. What are you gambling on with $4.5 million?
Well, apparently, it sounds like they're losing.
Yeah, big time. Whoever was gambling was not doing a very good job. Yeah, stealing millions to gamble. That is something. That is really... I don't know what to say to that, man. That is... I mean, you got a job that basically sets you up for the rest of your life, and you go screw it up like that. That's just insane. Let's see if we have... I'm going to zoom out. Let me go take a look here at our radar and surface map over the United States. If we got any... As we move through spring, we're going to start to look for more thunderstorm complexes to start to break them down. Not much really going on, though. We have the polar and Arctic air mass pushing over the northern plains with some areas of snowfall. Some nice thunderstorms down here around Oklahoma. Let me zoom in on that. Now, I used to live right about here back in my 20s. And typically what happens is that when you're around Oklahoma City, what happens is that you can see the thunderstorms coming in from the northwest, and it lights up the whole skyline, right? So you can see the lightning starting to break out. What looks like is happening here, nothing severe, but it looks like it's moving slow enough. They could actually have some flooding issues here on the north side of Oklahoma City. Not really looking at any severe thunderstorms here. No indication of that. But some pretty good convection. This right here, for those of you who are interested, this is a signal of a dry line right here. So basically what happens is that with the higher elevations, you get a lot of sinking air, and you get your dry air pushing south, and it runs into the more moist air here that's coming up from the Gulf of Mexico. So you get this line that marches through, and in the afternoon hours, it could spark off some pretty nasty thunderstorms. So let's see, not much going on over there. Let's zoom out. That front is just causing all sorts of little convection areas. And then we have our cold front. Now, what do you guys think of those squalls that moved through earlier on this afternoon? Driven pretty much by convective properties, instability in the atmosphere. Once the instability went, well, you're pretty much losing a lot of your forcing. So we still have some of those flurries here hanging around the Poconos and Catskills. But once again, up towards Oswego, more lake effect snow. Not too bad.
Honey.
Yep.
Somebody on X wants to know if you're going to the Godzilla movie on opening night on Thursday.
Already got, not on Thursday, but I got tickets for Friday.
Nights.
Yeah, we don't, Thursday, actually in Freehold, they don't even have tickets for Thursday night, but I got them for Friday already, or the minute they were available. We're actually going at an off hour. That way we don't have to deal with anybody else. Because we had one time we went to a Godzilla movie. I can't believe it. I never thought I'd be able to go to Godzilla movies at the movies. And someone kept on talking about Mothra and what is Mothra. And I'm like, shut up.
We were stuck next to somebody who kept
Oh,
asking,
I wanted to hit them with
what
a
is
bat.
this? What's going on? Well, dude, if you'd shut up, you'd watch the movie and you'd find out.
Big question was whether the interpreter was betting on sports. Oh, that's a good question.
Ooh,
Oh, boy.
probably.
And whether he knew about it. What if he knew about it? Couldn't happen to a nicer picture. Didn't really get much of anything. A brief little sprinkle from the showers that moved through. Will we get? Will it be dry or wet summer? I think it's going to be humid. It's going to be a humid summer. As far as whether it will be dry or wet is going to be dependent on just how far east those cold fronts get from the Great Lakes. But I definitely think it's going to be humid. It could be a situation where certain locations this summer keep on getting thunderstorms via convective development and the thermal gradient that's already in place and the moisture gradient that's in place. But other areas get next to nothing, and you just get this humidity that just lingers all summer. So we're going to have to watch to see how that plays out. Very easy for people to gamble that much. They just need to go to the higher stakes Asian games parlors, the $500 slot machines. Holy smokes. I almost got kicked out for blackjack. Just because I knew probability, and I was at Atlantic City, and the guy was very annoyed at me because I don't play. I don't gamble at all. I went to Atlantic City once. I didn't like any other games, but I like blackjack because I like probability. Duh, So I ran the table, and the poor guy can't call a La Nina summer that wasn't humid. Some have been really hot with little rain, others mild, but all were humid. Agreed. And it's all because of the southeast ridge. If you get that ridge set up around the Bahamas and builds up towards Bermuda, we're going to have a ton of humidity. The question is whether that ridge builds over towards the Tennessee River Valley, which leads to us being in the 90s and 100s in humid, or only builds towards the East Coast, which means we're 80s, lower 90s, and lots of thunderstorms. So we'll see. I like watching poker. I just can't play it. I don't have much of a poker face. So I'm just kind of like, it is what it is. If I had a better poker face, I probably could play better. Yeah, there's a good chance that March could go out like a lion. We'll see how that plays out. The last storm, this one and the one that's next, have the potential of producing rainfall, and then after that, I think we quiet down.
It ate the lamb.
Yeah, it pretty much. Mary had a little lamb, but I ate it. There you go.
And I ate it.
Cartoons that we grew up with. What can I say? Good cartoons back then. All right, well, it is 8:53. I think we answered all the questions before we start going into poker.
Somebody on X wants a Minneapolis forecast for the next 5 days.
No.
How do you feel about that one?
No. Okay, so a little bit of rules. We'll go over rules. I don't do in my backyard forecasting. Because then I start getting like 70,000 questions, and then it becomes too much. I did that once, and it was a nightmare because it was like, why did you ignore me? I'm like, dude, I got to sleep at some point, okay? So I keep in my backyard forecast, or hey, what's my flight going to be like? Stuff like that for premium consulting members because they pay for it. I can control it. I can answer it. It gives me enough time to forecast and research, but I don't do it on social media or on here. not because I'm like, oh, you can't talk to me, but it just becomes too overwhelming because then one person wants it, and the next person, and then it drives me insane. So, don't take it personally. Just don't do it.
Or insane enough.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much.
Just the right amount.
Well, I am a Mets fan. What can I say? Well, I think that's it for tonight. Thank you all for joining. As always, I really appreciate it. It's fun to have all the questions. And if we have any severe weather next week, of course, I will go over all that severe weather. In the meantime, stay safe out there.